Do you keep waiting to feel it? That big, obvious, lightning bolt moment where you suddenly feel ready to solo travel? Because I hate to break it to you, that feeling might just never turn up. And I know how that sounds. But stick with me, because today I want to walk you through the 5 signs I actually look for that tell me someone's ready for their first solo trip, even when they don't feel ready at all. Welcome back to The Anxious Solo Female Traveller. I'm Katie, and this is the podcast for women who dream of travelling solo, but anxiety or overthinking or 100 different what-ifs kept that dream on the maybe someday list. I've solo travelled to 24 countries now, with anxiety and social anxiety along for the ride every single time. And no, it never magically switched off. I still check my booking confirmations about 3 times too many, and I still get a tiny bit panicky if my phone battery drops below 50%, which is a completely rational fear in my opinion. So today I want to talk about readiness, because I think readiness is one of the most misunderstood words in solo travel. We treat it like this finish line, like one day you'll just cross it and suddenly you'll feel calm and sorted and completely sure. But that's just not how it worked for me. And it's not how it's worked for any of the women I've spoken to either through my solo travel confidence coaching calls. Okay, so first, let's bust the biggest myth, because I think this one trips more people up than anything else. The myth that you have to feel 100% ready and confident before you're allowed to book. Because honestly, most first-time solo travellers book while they're still anxious, not after the anxiety disappears. I certainly didn't feel ready before my first solo trip to that Christmas market in Montreux, Switzerland. I felt terrified, not ready at all. So if you're sat there waiting for that ready feeling to magically arrive before you book, you might just be waiting for a very, very long time. And look, that's a hard lesson, and I had to learn it myself. And it's even harder to actually put into action when your brain is anxious and looking for any reason to talk you out of it. But that's the shift I want you to make today. Stop asking, do I feel ready? And start asking, am I prepared enough for the next small step? Because that's the question that actually moves you forward. Not the other one. That one just keeps you stuck, scrolling, dreaming, and waiting. So with that in mind, let's get into the 5 signs. And these aren't some official checklist I made up just for this episode. This is genuinely the same readiness checklist I use with my confidence coaching clients. And honestly, the same one I still run through myself before every single trip. So let's start with the first one. Sign 1, you're thinking about when, not if. This is usually the first sign that comes up, and it's easy to miss because it feels so small. Maybe you've stopped saying, if I ever solo travel, and you've caught yourself saying, or even just thinking, when I go, instead. Even if you haven't picked a date, and even if your plans are still loose, a bit undecided, and honestly a complete mess. So I remember when I was dreaming about Montreux, before I'd even properly decided to go, I'd catch myself saying things like, I can't wait to go on the Ferris wheel for sunset, I hope I get good weather. Or, I need to leave enough time to walk along the banks of Lake Geneva, it's meant to be absolutely beautiful. And those things were completely subconscious. I hadn't sat down and made some big, brave decision to take the trip I was terrified of. But that subtle shift from if to when mattered more than it probably seemed at the time. Because it means some part of you has already accepted this is happening. And not in some vague, hazy someday, in your actual future. You don't need flights booked or even to have a destination locked in yet. Just notice it. Notice when starts creeping in and quietly replacing if. Because that's not nothing. That's your brain already planning for this to happen. And it shows up in other small ways too if you start looking for it. So maybe you've started saving little bits of money for the trip even though you haven't officially decided on one. Or maybe you've caught yourself looking up what the weather's like there in October, just out of interest, obviously. None of that is you committing to anything, but it is your brain quietly getting on board behind the scenes before you've consciously caught up with it. Sign 2. You've started picturing a real destination, not just somewhere, someday. So this one's the natural next step after sign 1. And somewhere someday is vague on purpose if you ask me. It's safe because it never actually has to become real. But if you've started picturing an actual place, that's a completely different thing. Even if you're still going back and forth between two options, it still counts. For me, it was Montreux. I kept coming back to that Christmas market, the Ferris wheel at sunset, the flying Santa I'd seen all over social media. And sure, I was too terrified to be 100% set on it, but I couldn't stop picturing myself there. And honestly, that's the sign in itself. Not certainty, but a place that keeps pulling you back again and again, even when you try to talk yourself out of it. So if you're sat there right now dreaming of a place, and maybe you've had it in mind for months, or maybe even years, that's sign 2 right there. And here's a little tip if the destination still feels a bit fuzzy, or you keep flipping between 3 different places. You don't actually need to solve that today. I actually used to take myself to National Trust Gardens near where I lived, just to practice being somewhere on my own. And eventually that built up to solo theatre matinees in London. I think I went to maybe about 6 shows one summer, purely because I was so determined to keep collecting little bits of evidence. None of that was the real trip, but it all fed into picturing myself somewhere on my own and actually enjoying it. Sign 3. You've thought about the what-ifs and you've found at least rough answers. Now, this one tends to surprise people because it sounds like the opposite of readiness, doesn't it? I mean, surely if you're still running through worst-case scenarios, you're not ready yet. But actually, it's the opposite. Before Switzerland, I had so many what-ifs, to the point I actually got sick of my own brain. What if I get lost? What if I panic? What if something goes wrong? So one day, thoroughly fed up with my own overthinking, I decided to actually sit with them and try to answer them properly, one by one. Okay, so what if I did get lost? Well, I'd duck into a shop, check Google Maps, find my way again. And if that didn't work, I'd ask a local for help. You see how that takes some of the fear and uncertainty out of it. And I didn't have perfect answers, not even close. But I had rough ones, and enough to know that I wasn't walking into this completely blind. And that's the sign right there. You're not looking for silence where the fear used to be, because that's not realistic, and honestly, I'd be lying if I said it ever fully goes quiet for me either. You're just looking for a rough plan, sat quietly underneath all the noise. So if you've caught yourself doing this, lying awake at 2 a.m., working through your what-ifs, even just a little bit, that's not proof that you're not ready. It's proof that you are. And look, I'll be honest with you, sometimes the what-ifs do actually happen. I got scammed by a taxi driver once in Zadar in Croatia. He agreed one price and then just doubled it by the time we arrived. But then I paid him, got myself to safety, and about an hour later I was watching one of the most beautiful sunsets of that entire trip. So even when a what-if does actually come true, it's very rarely as unsurvivable as your anxious brain makes it sound at 2 a.m. Sign 4. The fear of regret is starting to outweigh the fear of going. Okay, this one for me and for a lot of the women I speak to is often the real turning point. For a while, the fear of going is louder than absolutely everything else. What if it goes wrong? What if I hate it? What if I can't cope? Right? But at some point, a different fear starts creeping in, and that's the fear of not going. For me, that looked like picturing myself still sat at home this time next year and still saying maybe someday about Montreux while watching other people online live out the exact trip I'd been dreaming about. And this fear doesn't feel dramatic like your other what-ifs might. It's quieter than that. I can only really describe it as this small, nagging feeling sat somewhere in the back of your mind. But when that feeling starts to outweigh the fear of going, even just a tiny bit, that's not a coincidence. And I really think you should listen to it. Because this fear doesn't shout the way your what-ifs do. It doesn't turn up at 2 a.m. demanding 16 different backup plans. It's much quieter than that. It's more of a background hum, sat there while you're scrolling, watching someone else stood on that beach or wandering that cobbled old town, and something in you just aches a bit. That ache is always worth paying attention to. And finally, sign 5. You know you don't need every single answer before you book. I want to be clear, this isn't about having fewer worries than everyone else. It's about your relationship with those worries changing. And I say this with love as a fellow overthinker. But you need to stop needing the whole trip figured out before you'll let yourself book it. Instead, accept that a good enough plan, taken one step at a time, beats a perfect plan that you never actually finish. Because here's the thing about confidence. It's built, not something you wake up with one morning. It comes from doing the thing scared, not from having every single answer lined up first. So if you've reached the point where you know, even deep down, that you don't need it all figured out, that's not reckless. That's just another sign that you are ready right now as you are. And I think this is the one that trips up my most detail-oriented clients the most, if I'm honest. Because it feels almost irresponsible, doesn't it, to book something without having every single detail nailed down. But confidence really is built and not given. It's built through doing the thing, not through more research, or more planning, or more scrolling through blog posts. And yes, I include mine in that. So if some part of you already knows that a good enough plan will do, that's genuinely enough to move forward. So quickly, let's just recap those 5 signs, because I know it's a lot. Number 1, you're thinking when, not if. Number 2, you've started picturing a real destination, not just somewhere, someday. Number 3, you've thought about the what ifs and found at least rough answers. Number 4, the fear of regret is starting to outweigh the fear of going. And number 5, you know you don't need every single answer before you book. And here's something else I want to say really clearly now, because I think it matters. What if you read through those 5 signs and you only really recognised 1 or 2 of them? Well, that's still a completely valid starting point. Honestly, most people don't tick every single box before they book. I definitely didn't have all 5 sorted out before Switzerland. Readiness isn't all or nothing. It builds one step at a time, the exact same way that confidence does. So if you're only just starting to notice that when, not if shift, or if you're still working through your what ifs properly, that's not a reason to wait any longer. It just means that you're a step or 2 earlier than someone with all 5. That's all. Before we wrap up, here's your one small step for this week. I want you to think back over those 5 signs. Which ones do you already recognise in yourself? Maybe it's just 1, maybe it's 3, maybe it's all 5. It really doesn't matter. Write them down in your notes app or a journal, whatever's nearest. Because I promise you, once you actually see it written in front of you, in black and white, you'll realise you're a lot further along than you thought you were 5 minutes ago. And maybe the woman who's convinced that she isn't ready yet is actually a lot closer than she's been giving herself credit for. So if you've been waiting to feel 100% sure before you'll let yourself book, I really hope this episode gave you the permission to stop waiting for that. Because you don't need every answer. You don't need the fear to disappear first. You just need 1 or 2 of these signs and the willingness to take the next small step anyway. And if you're sat there now thinking, okay, I think I might be ready, but I still have no idea where to start, that's exactly why I created my free email course, 7 days to your first solo trip, even if you're anxious. It walks you through one small doable step each day, so you're never trying to figure out the whole trip in one go, just like we've talked about today. Because I think the reason so many of us stay stuck isn't a lack of desire. It's that book a solo trip feels like this one huge, overwhelming task sat right at the top of a mountain. And when something feels that big, our anxious brains would honestly rather do nothing at all than risk doing the wrong thing. So this email course breaks that mountain down into 7 tiny, doable steps instead. 1 a day straight to your inbox. It's genuinely the guide I wish someone had handed me back when I was still waiting for that ready feeling to magically show up on its own. I'll pop the link in the show notes or the description if you're watching on YouTube. And in the next episode, we're getting into something else I think almost every anxious solo traveller wonders about at some point. Is it actually normal to feel anxious before your first solo trip? If pre-trip anxiety sounds like something you need to hear about, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And I'll see you in the next episode.